The end of December 2010 was the 30th anniversary of the unidentified aerial lights, beams, and a triangular UFO craft that interacted with Air Force personnel over a 72-hour period around NATO's then largest air base, RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge. For the anniversary, I joined John Burroughs, Jim Penniston, and the Ancient Aliens television production crew to return to Woodbridge, England. What we didn't know was that the UK Defence Intelligence Analysis Staff, known as DI-55, has managed a secret UFO branch for the Ministry of Defense. On December 7, 2000, DI-55 sent to the MOD its 3-volume, 460-page study entitled Unidentified Aerial Phenomena or UAPs in the UK Air Defence Region, close quote. It's likely the MOD wanted UFO changed to UAP to cut down on FOIA requests. Nobody knew the new search term was now going to be UAP instead of UFO. The DI-55 study was highly classified, UK eyes only, UK secret, and is truly a de facto confirmation that UFOs are very real to UK and US government insiders. It was produced under a UK Ministry of Defence project called Condign. That word means suitable, especially with reference to punishment. For example, the prisoner has suffered condign punishment. So there is dry British wit and irony in the United Kingdom's Ministry of Defence conducting a secret defense intelligence staff investigation of UFOs and calling it Project Condign. The name implies that insiders felt honorable abuse for taking on such a mocked and difficult subject. Meanwhile, the MOD and UK National Archives collaborated in a publicity blitz to convince the general public that all Ministry of Defence UFO files were being transferred to the UK National Archives while the MOD's so-called UFO desk was being closed down. But the BBC caught one embarrassing fact on March 3, 2011, after the National Archives announced it was releasing 8,500 pages of UFO-related documents about UFOs from the Ministry of Defense. The BBC found out that, quote, intelligence papers on the Rendlesham incident have gone missing. Officials found a huge gap where defense intelligence files should have been. However, Bentwaters and Rendlesham Forest are not missing from the Project Condign UAP study that was first delivered to the MOD in December 2000, 11 years before MOD Rendlesham files went missing at the UK National Archives. Annex F in the UAP study is titled Non-Ionizing Electromagnetic Effects on Humans. Non-ionizing means electrons are not stripped from atoms as alpha, beta, and gamma radiations are. Instead, the Condign study describes complex combinations of non-ionizing electromagnetic radiations from UAP UFOs that are capable at certain distances and various frequencies of damaging human tissues and manipulating human minds. Page F4 about UAPs is entitled Potential Mental Effects on Humans. One of its most important paragraphs states, the well-reported Rendlesham Forest Bentwaters event is an example where it might be postulated that several observers were probably exposed to UAP radiation for longer than normal UAP sighting periods, close quote. Those words, longer than normal UAP sighting periods, that implies that the UK's DI-55 has learned enough about various UAP UFO non-ionizing radiations to at least have a baseline on the time of average human exposures to such radiations. What UAP radiation can do is described in the next paragraph 14. An important fact is that the reported effect of presumed UAP radiation on humans is that it is quick-acting and remembered, although curiously. Following the UAP event, there is little or no recall of events as a continuum. In short, the witness often reports an apparent gaps or lost time, often not accounting for up to several hours. It is described as though the exposure causes a temporary memory erasure. The next paragraph 15 states, "It is concluded, therefore, that if some UAPs, as is believed and correlated by actual reports, like collateral effects on car electrical equipment, and they produce EM radiation, then there is a high probability that the UAP radiation can affect the human brain." The Condign study does not give specific details about exactly which non-ionizing frequencies emitted from UFOs can manipulate human minds. That's probably highly classified. But UFO investigators are very familiar with screen memories in the human abduction syndrome, when an alien being appears to be an owl or a deer or even a close relative. But it is a report that confirms that UAP non-ionizing frequencies can injure human hearts and eyes and produce telepathic images such as symbols and binary code and cause memory erasure. But page F7 of Annex F lists different UAP or UFO diameters ranging from 1/2 meter to 20 meters or 66 feet. And this is talking about some kind of hard craft. The DI-55 study, quote, assumes that UAP is a radiation plasma or charged mass source with effective aperture shown. These are the words in the report. And that means the diameter of these UAPs. However, this should not be confused, and this is from Project Condign. This should not be confused with the large triangles, rectangles, and other large shapes reported, close quote. So right here in this study, UAPs are further defined as something that comes in various large shapes, seen in the Earth's atmosphere, that are not shaped like terrestrial aircraft. Certain frequencies of non-ionizing radiation, which essentially are radio frequency electromagnetic energies from radio waves to microwaves to infrared to visible light, include terahertz. The red underlined frequencies between extremely high frequency microwaves and far to near infrared. Those terahertz frequencies have now been linked to the heart tissue damage of John Burroughs at RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge in December 1980. So terahertz emitted from extraterrestrial UFO craft might be why there have been reports over the decades about ETs warning human abductees or contactees not to approach a UFO craft too closely until the craft has landed and shut down its propulsion system. I'm going to share more about John Burroughs and that context in a few minutes. In this important Project Condign, the Appendix A5 lists exotic technologies. There, exotic solutions are described as force beyond human understanding and contrary to the laws of physics as we understand them, close quote. Another section is entitled UAPs as propelled vehicles. There, the DI-55 study dismisses a lot of UAP reports as natural phenomena, but then it discusses the residual percentage of UAP reports that cannot be explained. One of the extreme postulations is that these residual UAPs are, in fact, genuine constructed air vehicles which use potential scientific and engineering principles which are beyond currently applied knowledge. Thus, they must have some sort of propulsion systems which would provide the extraordinary range of velocities and accelerations and presumably both endo and exo-atmospheric capabilities. That's Project Condign words, and it means they can move in and out of the Earth's atmosphere. And that methods of propulsion may in fact be possible that are beyond our current understanding in the UK. The DI-55 report then goes through a list of various exotic propulsions that might be used by observed UAPs, such as antimatter, anti-proton propulsion, electric propulsion technologies including arc jets, stationary plasma thrust, ion thrusters, field emission propulsion, projected energy, torsion, gravity, and laser fields that might apply to remote sensing, geovision and geoscan and modeling planets, the sun, and other space objects. There is also laser propulsion and microwave propulsion. In paragraph 31 about propulsion options, DI-55 contemplates whether the UAP propulsion systems could be duplicated with terrestrial technology and concludes, quote, propulsion mode is the key factor in considering whether it would be possible to construct a vehicle with reported UAP attributes and potentially with an extraterrestrial capability using existing Earth technology, or be possible to conceive such a craft which can move with zero or near zero sound, meaning silent, and change the direction of movement almost instantly, close quote. So the UK's Ministry of Defense has been trying to understand how UAP UFOs work without sound, at extremely high speeds, jumping point to point and making 90-degree turns. That makes this entire 460-page UAP study a confirmation that UAPs, UFOs are real and physically affect Earth life. That means UAPs, UFOs are of great defense significance. That is why this 2000 Project Condign study by the MOD's DI-55 is a smoking gun that confirms government knowledge of UAPs, UFOs as very advanced technologies that emit non-ionizing radiation that can injure human bodies and manipulate human minds. When we were in England working on the Ancient Aliens production, none of us knew about the Project Condign DI-55 report that links non-ionizing radiation from unidentified aerial phenomena to injury of human tissues and manipulation of human brains and minds. We all returned to the United States on New Year's 2011, and a month later in February, John Burroughs became very ill. He was diagnosed with congestive heart failure and atrial fibrillation. His lungs were filling up with water because his heart was not pumping right and would get out of rhythm. When John went to the Phoenix VA for medical disability help, to his dismay and shock, the VA told him there were no military records of John being in the U.S. Air Force at RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge between 1979 and 1982. So John sought the help of Arizona U.S. Senator John Kyle. John was able to provide his own personal military file records that he had definitely been an airman first class at the big NATO base in England from 1979 to 1982. The next shocking information came in a letter from Senator Kyle's office in which the VA said John's medical records had been withheld because John's Air Force medical records were classified. Senator Kyle retired, and U.S. Senator John McCain picked up John Burroughs' fight with the VA, and his office was able to get John's DD-214 official military record corrected to show that he was, in fact, on U.S. Air Force duty at RAF Bentwaters, Woodbridge, England from 1979 to 1982. By then, John Burroughs was so ill with persistent atrial fibrillation, but various medical tests could not find any evidence of heart disease, such as clogged arteries. John's heart condition worsened to life-threatening by the fall of 2013, while Arizona VA cardiologists remain very puzzled about why. That's when John first received some pages from the UK Condign report about unidentified aerial phenomena from a retired MOD staffer and the information about terahertz frequencies emitted from UFOs that can damage human tissues, including hearts, and manipulate human minds. So next came help from a longtime medical consultant to the Central Intelligence Agency. He knew about UFO impacts on human minds and bodies, and that the likelihood was the mitral valve leaflets in John's heart were damaged. That CIA doctor ended up sharing his confidential knowledge with John's civilian doctors when John had open heart surgery on December 18, 2013. The surgeons found that the posterior leaflet in the mitral valve was shredded and the anterior was torn and disintegrating. One doctor told John, quote, "If you did not have that surgery then, you would have dropped dead 2 or 3 days later," close quote. Finally, in January 2015, the Veterans Administration finally and officially granted retired U.S. Air Force Tech Sergeant John Burroughs full medical disabilities for injuries in the line of duty when John was exposed to non-ionizing radiation at close range twice from unidentified lights and beams in Rendlesham Forest, December 26th and December 28th, 1980. That is when John's attorney sent out a press release to the world, headlined, quote, "U.S. government's de facto acknowledgement of the existence of UFOs," close quote. I interviewed both John and his attorney, Pat Frasconia, in February for a 2-part Earth Files report and several radio broadcasts and other programs about the VA and MOD breakthroughs. By March 8th, I also did an Earth Files news segment on YouTube. And in all those broadcasts, I stressed that to this day, John Burroughs' 1979 to 1982 medical records from his U.S. Air Force assignment at RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge are still withheld by the VA as classified. There was a lot of buzz about that news on the internet. By the evening of March 13, 2015, this reply header showed up in the above top secret thread under a discussion topic listed as, quote, U.S. Department of Defense has confirmed the UFO phenomena is real, close quote. That's what they led with. The thread discussion centered around the question, why would John Burroughs' medical records from RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge be classified, and was that legal? The name on the thread header is Kit Green. More formally, Kit Green is Christopher Kit Green, MD. Back in 1982, Dr. Green was on a list called the Aviary. This was a list of bird names unofficially put together by UFO investigators William Moore and Jamie Chandray as code names for a few anonymous whistleblowers and UFO researchers. Some on the list were professional investigators such as astronomer and author Jacques Vallée. Others were from counterintelligence trying to maintain the old World War II policy of denial about extraterrestrial technologies and biological entities interacting with Earth, past and present. Dr. Kit Green was on that list as Blue Jay. He admits he worked for the Central Intelligence Agency on remote viewing research and later became Chief of Biomedical Sciences at General Motors. More recently, Dr. Green has worked as Assistant Dean, Asia Pacific in the Wayne State School of Medicine, and as Professor of Diagnostic Radiology and Psychiatry in the Detroit Medical Center. Here is Dr. Green's entire and extraordinary March 13, 2015 statement. I am Christopher Kit Green, MD, PhD, FAAFS, which stands for Fellow American Academy of Forensic Sciences. This is a reply to the entire thread and will only address two issues that are common throughout many comments on this thread. They are question number one: how can it be true that medical records such as John Burroughs could have been classified? Is this true? Is it sensible? What are the reasons? And question number two: what caused his injuries and several other present over the encounter with the odd air form that emitted the broadband non-ionizing electromagnetic radiation? It is true. John Burroughs' records, about 1,000 pages, and to this day still many hundreds, were in fact legally classified. In my 46-year career as a medical officer and a physician with CIA, including as Staff Officer, Chief of Medical Intelligence, Life Sciences Division, and Assistant National Intelligence Officer for Science and Technology, I had, until a year or so ago, only seen a handful of truly classified medical records. Those of Adolf Hitler, John Kennedy's autopsy, and recently, John Burroughs. I was able to quickly determine that the reasons were quite simple. Medical records are not usually digital, and they are easily sequestered in multiple locations and almost impossible to find. These of John's were, and remain, except for recent years, in hard copy, scanned and separated from FOIA access, and even from my access. Thank God that a couple of senators, John McCain and John Kyle from Arizona, had the guts to push and push to disentangle that which was legitimately classified from those records that were needed to make the right decision about injury sustained while on active duty, period. It was true. It is sensible. It is not entirely the stuff to make us physicians very proud. Very, very few physicians even care about this arcane area of research, and fewer know about the injuries sustained by near field about 100 meters to humans. That's 328 feet. That's about the length of a football field. The data is sparse. It is not properly peer-reviewed. It is not understood. It is not the subject of current research. And that is the truth. The decision that was made to grant medical disability to John was just. Even though the MOD had made a large public show back in 2011 that it had released all of its UFO UAP files to UK's National Archives, the MOD clearly had not. Not long after the surgery that saved John's life, he began filing Freedom of Information Act inquiries to the Ministry of Defense about Project Condign. That's when a series of MOD replies through 2014 led to the MOD's finally admitting by September of 2014 that it has withheld 18 UFO-related files, including 6 policy files, not stated as specific to RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge of 1980, but finally, a Ministry of Defense admission that all of their publicity in earlier years about transferring all MOD UFO files to the UK National Archive was as phony as telling the BBC that, quote, intelligence papers on the Rendlesham incident have gone missing, close quote. Lord Black of Brentwood in England's Parliament in March 2015, and a few times since then, has asked the Ministry of Defense to release the 18 MOD files about unexplained flying objects. But strangely, in an unprecedented action in English history, in June 2016, the MOD finally, but completely secretly, transferred the 18 files to the UK National Archive, only to take them all back to the MOD in August 2016 without explanation. At the beginning of January 2015, John Burroughs finally received full medical disabilities from the Veterans Administration for injuries in the line of duty after exposure to non-ionizing radiation at close range in Rendlesham Forest. His attorney was proud to issue that press release that was headlined U.S. government's de facto acknowledgement of the existence of UFOs. In acknowledging that John's injury was in the line of duty after exposure to UFOs emitting terahertz frequencies. In addition to the physical and mental impacts that the terahertz frequencies of the phenomena had on John Burroughs and others, only a few weeks ago, on April 16, 2016, the UK's Mirror headline, quote, radar operators say UFO traveled 120 miles in 8 seconds in Britain's famed close encounter, close quote, referring to the Rendlesham Forest incident of December 26 to 28, 1980. That information came from two former radar operators, Ike Barker and Jim Carey, who were on duty in an air traffic control tower. The two men, now retired from U.S. Air Force radar work, were interviewed for a new documentary film by UFO investigator Robert Hastings entitled UFOs and Nukes, The Secret Link Revealed. Some observers back in December 1980 thought lights and/or beams went down into the weapons storage areas containing tactical nuclear weapons. There have been rumors that some of the nuclear weapons at RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge were tampered with by the unidentified aerial phenomena. Ike Barker says the anomalous radar target crossed their screens at the astounding speed of 120 miles in 8 seconds. That is 54,000 miles an hour. That is about 70 times the speed of sound, and definitely not human technology. Barker said, quote, it wasn't like any radar target I've ever seen. It was traveling at an extremely high rate of speed. It passed over the control tower and then it stopped. There were lights around the center, but not like navigation lights. It was more like portholes, as if you were seeing the lights from the inside coming out. It hovered momentarily, then reversed its course and went back out at a high rate of speed. The intensities of unknown frequencies, fields, and radiations that people in Rendlesham Forest were exposed to between December 26th and 28, 1980 became even a more dramatic question when talking with the woman retired from the Woodbridge Elementary School that I have referenced in another Truth Hunter. And here is a second excerpt from her in our interview on December 29th, 2010, an interview in Woodbridge, England.
So it was on Monday, and when I got to the school, the workmen were there, and they were saying that the house that had been there wasn't there anymore. And I said, what do you mean the house isn't there anymore? And they said the house was gone. That's how we knew that there was a house. Now, I didn't ask Colonel Holt if he had to sign this statement, but I think the reason being that it was the two of us is because we were civilians.
Maybe in 1980 it was so incomprehensible to say there was a house and people and everything was here, and then it wasn't here.
Well, some of them, as I understand it from my workmen, though, they went to the police and they wanted to know what happened to the house.
The woman said the house that disappeared was, quote, right across from the East Gate, close quote. From her Woodbridge home, she would have driven down this road, turned right onto this back road to the East Gate as a shortcut from town to the elementary school near the airbase. This is a currently available Google map where I marked the East Gate with a straight yellow line and marked the Foley house with a yellow circle. Along the road to the East Gate, there are 2 patches of trees and bushes that might once have grown around a house or building. Nearby, there is also a rectangle that might have been the foundation of a structure there. I have tried calling the woman again, but there is no answer. She might not be alive now. John Burroughs, I, and a Woodbridge, England friend have also tried to find a 1980 or 1979 aerial map or ordnance map that would show the East Gate to see if another house was nearby in addition to the long-standing Foley house. But it is as if someone scrubbed clean not only internet maps, but our Woodbridge friend was told by the local Suffolk County Records Office that all maps and ordnance surveys for 1980 are missing there as well. The suspicion is the government took them. The idea that a house would disappear after strange lights, beams, and a UFO were in the nearby forest? Probably a lot of you are thinking, as I did, about the Philadelphia experiment that allegedly took place October 28, 1943. But other people since 1943 have also alleged that the whole ship popped in and out of our space-time between Norfolk, Virginia, and the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. So there is a possibility of space-time manipulation in Rendlesham Forest as well that would have caused the disappearance of that house. John and Jim each told me that on December 26, 1980, when they were trying to follow the lights through the trees, and this was a quote, "Time seemed to slow down. Both felt like they were moving in slow motion and remembered their skin tingled and the hair on their heads and their necks rose like they were in a strong electrostatic field." It was Jim Peniston who remembered the intense flare of white light, seeing a small black glassy triangular craft on the forest floor right after the blinding white light. Sergeant Peniston did not know where John was, but he walked around the craft, dragging his fingers over its smooth, glassy surface that felt warmer than the cold, humid winter air. When he got to the front right side of the triangle vertex, there were symbols that were raised like Braille, Peniston said. As his fingers traced along the tops of the symbols, his mind was filled with zeros and ones, binary code, and telepathic thoughts about the source of the black triangle. And he thought that what came into his mind was human time travelers from 40,000 years in the future. That their mission was to harvest genetic material from an Earth timeline so that it could be used as Band-Aids to keep the civilization alive in a far future that faces survival problems. Physicist and astrobiologist Paul Davies at Arizona State University is author of How to Build a Time Machine and another book, The Eerie Silence, Renewing Our Search for Alien Intelligence. In Eerie Silence, on page 121, Professor Davies wrote, quote, "Our best understanding of the nature of time comes from Einstein's general theory of relativity, which does seem to permit journeys both forward and backward in time. All you need to do to reach the future sooner is to move as fast as possible. For example, at 99% of the speed of light, if you set off now, you could reach Earth year 2100 in less than 13 years. getting back from the future is a much tougher challenge, although not strictly forbidden by the general theory of relativity. Journeying backwards in time involves exotic super technology, such as hypothetical wormholes in space, that have an exit and entrance, close quote. But so far as we are moving toward the middle of the 21st century, even CERN's Large Hadron Collider has not turned up a single wormhole. I have reported about the concept of extraterrestrial self-activated technology like this photograph that uses self-activating software. What if the unidentified aerial phenomena in Rendlesham Forest so many years ago was an unmanned, time-traveling drone on an emergency survival mission for its civilization? What if time travel involves moving in and out of wormholes like point-to-point energy bursts that we see as blinding flashes of white light and might cause matter to appear or disappear? There is a paradox in Peniston's recall of the telepathic transmission from the glowing craft. The implication is that the time travelers are human descendants from a place 40,000 years in the future where humanity is dying out. Time machine craft are sent back through time to harvest genetic material from our present Earth life in order to help a future civilization survive. The explanation given for traveling thousands of years into the past was to avoid affecting the time traveler's own future timeline in some dangerous, uncontrollable way. But moving backwards in time to a distant past to survive is changing the future. Perhaps the paradox is a translation problem in which we humans lack the language and understanding of a different cosmology than we have discovered so far. Fans of Star Trek and Star Wars and other science fiction are accustomed to plots that include allies or enemies that use time travel for transportation, to fight wars, to change destinies, and to even gain immortality. Whether the different lights, beams, craft, and symbols in Rendlesham Forest belong to time travelers or extraterrestrial biological entities from inside this universe, or non-human entities from parallel universes or other dimensions, why is the truth suppressed? Why can't governments tell their citizens that humans are not alone in this universe? What facts about other intelligences interacting with Earth do government insiders know and consider so dangerous that they hide those facts for decades under a policy of denial in the interest of national security? Even keeping John Burroughs' medical records from Bentwaters classified from him and everyone else when his heart was failing. If national security is built on lies and deceptions, it is no one's security. It is social imprisonment by illusion. The 1980 high strangeness in Rendlesham Forest has never rested easily in the minds of those who were actually there. Perhaps like human time-release capsules, John Burroughs, Jim Peniston, Adrian Bustinza, Colonel Halt, and all of the others have embedded within them pieces of truth about an incomprehensible future, or pieces of lies that keep humans corralled by illusions. Either way, whatever penetrated the Rendlesham Forest in December 1980 is still reverberating years later with so much power that John Burroughs cannot forget the haunting telepathic lights and the question, what is their source? What if the key to the Rendlesham Forest mystery is a tangle of past, present, and future timelines, like a knot? If the knot is untied by advanced technologies, what happens to past, present, and future? What else disappears or appears out of nowhere? Are we unconsciously in the ultimate paradox? We are they are us. Life on Earth is not guaranteed, but the mysterious telepathic lights and their makers are using us to help them survive by coming back in time to the 20th and 21st centuries, the last time genetic material on Earth was worth harvesting. If all humans became conscious of other life in the universe and the unexpected revelation that time manipulation is used in cosmic survival efforts, would our understanding change the future for them and for us to survival? Or at least buy more time in this universe of entropy, where life is never guaranteed? Whatever revelations come next, I think we are in the century in which the whole Earth will learn that we are not the only life in this vast universe, and that other intelligences are interacting now, as they have in the past, with this planet. This is Linda Moulton Howe. Please stay tuned to my Truth Hunter series on Gaia for more surprises about our universe, this solar system, and the planet we live on.